The following critique is intended to provide the members of the St. Catharines Camera Club with information to help improve their photography skills. The critics are members of the club. This image tells us a natural story. The image itself lacks impact, mostly because of the lack of sharpness. Many detail areas are not in sharpened focus. The background is somewhat bright. It could be toned down. The brightness is a distraction from the subject. This image can be used for competition, but it would not score well. The story is good in this image. The composition is good, especially the placement of the bird. The branches are a little distracting and would benefit greatly from toning them down. The bird seems oversaturated and is in your face. The feather texture and detail are lost. Patterns of light over the snow is a wonderful topic to explore. Snow simplifies the scene, and it is necessary to photograph the scene with bright, low angular sunlight. This will produce well-defined pattern of shadows and highlights that will create a dynamic visual design across the image. The parallel snow dunes are evident in this image. However, they lack definition since the maker did not develop the image in post-processing to deliver the pronounced shadow and highlight. Simply emphasize the shadow and highlight areas with local burn and dodge tools. Good even exposure throughout. Opportunities to photograph a flock of geese are always tempting, especially if the arrangement provides an interesting pattern. The maker may consider some suggestions. The image may be improved by having the geese more to the left of the image moving into the scene. Would the image be improved by cropping out the trees in the background but leaving the interesting reflections intact, thus simplifying the image with having the reflection provide context? The maker should be commended for including a section of trees in the foreground to give depth perspective. However, a change in position might make this tree a little less dominant and distracting. Use it more effectively to frame the geese. Consider zooming closer to include fewer geese, but selected for interesting pattern, behavior, color, etc. The image has been post-processed for a HDR-like effect. This resulted in the compression of the dynamic range by brightening shadows and suppressing highlights. So the image is flat and thus it is not interesting. It is hard to figure what the maker is trying to say to the viewer about what is important in the image. Instead of the HDR treatment, the maker could have used local dodge and burn tools to emphasize what the intention of the image is and thus guide the viewer into the image. Interesting effect, giving it a pen and ink appearance. Good subject and good vantage point. Leading lines lead to the barn. as shown here to be the subject. The maker should make sure the vertical lines of the bridge are vertical. The maker here succeeded in achieving good exposure balance between the barn, the sky, and the interior of the bridge. A good story here. The composition is good, as is the color and the exposure. The image lacks impact, but does fit the cute critter category. The image can be used in competition, but may not score well. The maker has good lighting and exposure on the bird, except perhaps for a small section at the top half of the beak. Feather detail is nice. Eyes are clear. The maker might consider changing position somewhat in order not to have the flowering bush directly above the bird head. This is distracting. Consider placing the bush to the left in the top where it might serve as a balance to the image. The subject of the image is the building. Sadly, the building is shrouded in deep and muddy shadows and darkness. We cannot see any details of the building. Expose for the subject first, in this case exposing a single image to showcase the subject would have blown out the surrounding trees and sky. So expose a second image using a tripod needed for the sky and one stop under. In post-processing, combine the two images. A pleasing result would be a correctly exposed building full of detail to gain attention of the viewer, surrounded by correctly exposed sky and trees that optionally can be dodged further to retain focus on the subject. There is one additional defect. A person has crept into the frame at the lower right hand corner, almost at the edge of the frame. Both the size and position of the figure gives the impression that the maker did not plan on including this figure in the frame. The figure could have been used to give scale of the main subject if it had been further in the left into the frame, where it would be obvious that this is a very dull structure. Border patrol is critical in composition. Check all around the frame to exclude any distractions, or if you have to include them in the initial frame, remove them in post-processing.